What if the love you give away so easily is not devotion, but a quiet form of self-betrayal? What if caring too much is not your strength but your disguise? You've been told to care, to hold on, to fight for what matters. But what if this fight is not for love but for validation? And what if the more you care, the more you bleed? Not because love hurts, but because your need to be seen has become louder than your voice. They told you that indifference is cold, that letting go is giving up. But Carl Jung taught that the unconscious clings to what it hasn't integrated, and that caring, without boundaries, is often the unconscious screaming for recognition. What if your obsession with others is just your shadow trying to be accepted? What if you were never truly loving, only repeating the pattern of emotional hunger that began long before you met them? There is something seductive about caring too much. It makes you feel alive, needed, important, but slowly it eats away your center. You give and you give, not knowing that every gift carries a silent question. Will you choose me now? And when they don't, when they walk away, you collapse, not from loss but from exhaustion. You didn't love them. You needed them to love you in the place you've never loved yourself. But what happens when you stop? When you stop begging for breadcrumbs of affection? When you stop shrinking to be more digestible? Something ancient shifts. The energy once spent chasing begins to return home. And what was desperation becomes clarity. What was fear becomes stillness. What was longing becomes power. Jung believed that true transformation begins where illusion ends, and most illusions are born from the wounds we never named. This is not a lesson in detachment. It's a call to awakening, a pull into the raw truth of your own psyche. The moment you stop caring like they taught you, with self-sacrifice, silence, and hope, everything begins to change. Not outside you, inside. And when your inner world shifts, reality bends with it. Keep watching. Because this isn't just about stopping, it's about remembering who you were before the world convinced you to disappear in order to be loved. There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when the soul begins to retreat. Not from the world, but from the role it was forced to play. You smile, you give, you stay, not because it feels right, but because you fear what would happen if you stopped. You fear the silence, you fear the distance, you fear becoming invisible. But what if disappearing is the only way to be truly seen? What if your presence, when it's no longer performative, becomes sacred? Carl Jung whispered what most of us refuse to hear. We do not see the world as it is. We see it through the lens of our unhealed wounds. And so, we care, not from abundance, but from absence. We give, not from love, but from longing. Every time you overextend, every time you chase, every time you apologize for existing too loudly, you are not loving. You are surviving. And survival has a cost, yourself. There is a hunger that no touch can satisfy, no word can quiet. It is the hunger to be chosen by someone who mirrors your earliest neglect. The wound seeks recognition, not healing. And in that seeking, we call obsession love. We call pain passion. We call emotional collapse romantic tragedy. But Jung saw it differently. He saw the unconscious as a theater, where we replay old stories, hoping for new endings, using new faces. What if you've been playing a role written for someone else? What if the script you followed, to always care, to always fix, to always wait, was never yours? You inherited it from a parent, a culture, a silence, and now it feels like truth. But it's not. It's just repetition. And repetition feels safe because it's familiar, not because it's right. The moment you stop caring from that place is the moment you start writing your own story. The ache you feel when you step back isn't loss, it's withdrawal. Withdrawal from your addiction to external validation, to emotional performance, to the illusion that love must be earned through sacrifice. You are detoxing from a belief that kept you small. That told you that if you just cared enough, gave enough, endured enough, they would stay. But your value was never meant to be transactional. Your soul was never a currency. When you stop caring, you begin to observe. You notice who only called when you gave, who only stayed when you were silent, who only loved when you forgot yourself. You start to see patterns, not as failures, but as mirrors. Every unmet need, every ignored boundary, every overlooked red flag was never about them. It was about your relationship with yourself. And that relationship is now changing, but change is terrifying. The part of you that learned to please, to accommodate, to anticipate everyone else's needs before your own, it doesn't die quietly. It resists, it panics. It tells you that you'll end up alone, that no one will understand this new you. That being soft means being available, and being available means being loved. But softness can be fierce, and boundaries can be gentle. Jung knew this paradox. The stronger the self, the deeper the connection. So you learn to sit in the discomfort, to let people misunderstand your silence, to allow others to think you've changed, because you have. You are no longer available for relationships that demand your silence as proof of your worth. You are no longer performing your pain for the approval of others, and in that stillness something emerges. Not loud, not proud, just true. And truth, once felt, cannot be unfelt. You begin to grieve, not just people, but identities. The caretaker, the fixer, the rescuer. These roles kept you safe, but also kept you small. Jung spoke of individuation as a rebirth, a shedding of personas that no longer serve the soul. And here you are, shedding. Not to become someone else, but to return to who you've always been beneath the noise. The one who never needed to beg to be loved. This is not the end of your caring. It's the beginning of conscious caring, of caring without disappearing, of loving without losing, of giving without bleeding. When you stop caring in the unconscious way, the way rooted in fear and old wounds, you begin to love from clarity, from presence, from truth. And in that space, everything begins to work, not because they changed, but because you did. And now in the hollow space where need once lived, there is breath, not emptiness, but expansion. You have touched the moment when silence feels louder than approval, when being unseen is less terrifying than being erased. What you once called love now looks like surrender, not of the heart, but of the self. And what was once your survival mask and slips away like fog in morning light. You stood on the edge of the old self, the one who begged, who clung, who bled to feel needed, and you did not jump. You watched that version of you crumble gently into memory, like an autumn leaf finally letting go of the branch. There was no violence in that ending, only grace, the kind of grace that rises not from victory, but from truth reclaimed. You realize, now that peace doesn't always roar, sometimes it arrives in the form of boundaries, in the quiet refusal to abandon yourself again, in the sacred act of choosing solitude over self-erasure. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And for the first time, you're beginning to understand what that really means. Not every love story is meant to be with another. Some of them begin the moment. You stop reaching outward and turn inward, toward the child inside you who just wanted to be enough. You no longer demand that others complete you because you've remembered that wholeness was never lost, only hidden beneath years of performing, pleasing and proving. You feel lighter but not empty. You feel softer but not weaker. You feel alone but not lonely. Because now your company no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like a homecoming. You are not rebuilding from brokenness. You are returning from exile. And that return is not loud. It is sacred, personal, irrevocable. There's a strange ache in becoming. It is the grief of no longer needing what once defined you, of outgrowing the very patterns that kept you safe. But isn't that what healing truly is? Not the absence of pain, but the presence of self. The self that was buried beneath shoulds, musts and maybes. The self that now rises, quiet, rooted, real. Let this be your turning point. Not in reaction, but in revelation. Let this be the night where you no longer shrink for love, where you no longer whisper your truth hoping it won't be too much. You are not too much. You never were. You were simply waiting for the moment when your caring could be conscious, sovereign, and free of survival. Do not rush to fix this feeling. Let it linger. Let it echo in your chest when you lie in bed tonight. Let it whisper in the silence between your thoughts. Let it pull you gently toward the next layer of who you are. Because this is not the end. This is the unraveling of what never truly belonged to you. And in that unraveling, your essence emerges. If something in you cracked open tonight, even slightly, follow that crack. Not to escape, but to explore. There is more shadow to meet, more light to remember. And in the next video, we'll go deeper into the invisible bonds that keep you loving who hurts you. Jung left a map. You're following it now, step by step, story by story. If this touched you, stay, not for me, for you. Subscribe to the unfolding of yourself. Comment, not to respond, but to reveal. Share, not to impress, but to awaken. Join, not a channel, but a movement, a remembering. And let every word you just heard become the mirror that reflects who you were, before you had to care your way into being loved.